I will now hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping note.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. Please use your microphone and switch it off once you've finished speaking. Please switch any mobile devices to silent. If the fire alarm rings, please leave the room and use the nearest fire exit. Do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point in the car park. Thank you.
For the benefit of those listening, watching the meeting online, please would members introduce themselves during the meeting, if not already introduced by name. Could I also ask officers who are called to speak to also give their name, their post, and a one-liner as to their responsibilities, please? It will help. First on the agenda is apologies. Do we have any apologies? No apologies, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. To approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of March and the annual meeting held on the 12th of May. Do I have your approval, members?
Can I abstain for the 12th of May, Mr. Chairman? I wasn't here.
Understood. Thank you. Item number 2, declarations of interest. If any member has any interest they wish to declare, they can do it now, but I would accept it closer to the situation where they feel they do have a conflict of interest if they wish to wait. Public participation, there is none. Right, item 4, update from the Environment Agency. I'd like to welcome Ian Miller from the agency, who's going to take us through this particular subject. Over to you, Ian.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Ian Miller from the Environment Agency, and specifically Flood Risk Management and the Partnership and Strategic Overview team. I'm actually a senior advisor, but at the moment in the hot seat as team leader. My team leader is on long-term absence at the moment. So I have a few slides for you. Hopefully they're going to be touching the information that's going to be relevant of importance to you. However, I'm more than happy to take questions as we're going through the slides. We can come back to slides if people want that. So there's a bit of a general overview here. I go to the next one, as well as just some changes in policies, modelling information that we've been undertaking, and I guess importantly for everyone, some updates on what you would call the waterfront strategy. If I can, sorry. Just wanted to go back actually very quickly to that previous slide. It's only in my notes here. It's been one of the important points, I think, is working in partnership, especially for the Environment Agency and working with flood authorities such as New Forest District Council. And yeah, I'd just like to take this opportunity, and not to embarrass them too much, to the gentleman either side of me, to say thank you for working with us. It's been historically quite a long time, and specifically on the Hurstpick to Lymington strategy, which I know has been at times quite challenging. But looking at the bigger flood risk management picture, there are a number of changes in the world of flood risk which are leading some uncertainty into our desired approach. And although there is change, we will also see improvements, hopefully, in the understanding and ability for us to deliver the interventions that we want to manage. Just got a very quick slide here on our roles and responsibilities. Really just a bit of a reminder, I suppose, and it's to clarify a key part of the Environment Agency's role, responsibility for managing the risk of flooding from main rivers, reservoirs, estuaries and the sea. And again, for clarity, main rivers, it's a legal designation, a legal term. It doesn't necessarily mean it's I know the Hampshire Avon or a large river as such like that. It can be quite small watercourses. And I guess for yourselves, importantly, coastal erosion is a big thing along your coastline. And as the Coastal Authority, New Forest District Council, as a Coastal Protection Authority under the Act, obviously have responsibilities there. Moving on again. Now, we work under, as any large organisation, we'll have a corporate strategy and then we'll have business plans, etc., which sort of overarch the work that we undertake. Following on from our last strategy called EA 2025, which was covering the last 5 years, we have a new one now, which rather imaginatively has been called EA 2030. There's no major changes in the strategy as such. You've got the key objectives of healthier air, land and water, the support for sustainable growth, which is obviously a big topic with government at the moment, and a nation resilient to climate change, which is more where our flood risk comes in. And underneath that, we've got 6 principles, and they're around innovation, efficiency, as I touched on earlier, partnership working, and for us ourselves around clarity. And when I say clarity, that's going to be around clear on what we can and can't do, where our remit sits, because I think like most government-funded organisations at the moment, funding resource is tight, and we need to prioritise where we're working on a risk-based approach. Knowledge and conviction, which is looking at technical skills and learning, is another principle, along with care and safety, and that's care and safety for the community and also for everybody who's working in the organisation. There's a slight shift in flood risk management with a greater focus on managing current and existing flood risk assets. There's most definitely been a lack of investment historically over existing assets and a drive to install new assets. And there's a significant step change that we're actually looking to manage our existing assets for longer, if possible, and create greater resilience for what we have at the moment. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be delivering new projects and schemes where we can, but that is a bit of a step change. So future funding and investment. I'm sure everyone's aware of the very recent government spending review. The main headline for flood risk for that was that there's a 4.2 billion investment into flood risk management over 3 financial years commencing April 26. So that will be basically our new spending review period. We did have a 6-year spending review period previously. The current government actually cut that by 1 year, but then we've now come into this agreement of the next. And that value, I know they've said it's an increase. It probably is a flat rate, but over inflation and real terms, it's a slight decrease, but it's fairly consistent. I think what's hopefully going to give us a bit more opportunity is that there is a review, a consultation at the moment to partnership funding. So on June the 3rd, DEFRA launched a consultation, which is a major update to the partnership funding policy, which has been in place since 2011. And given probably where we are in the world today, not necessarily fit for purpose. So the aim for the next flight, this is to be in place. The aim for this new policy is to be in place for the commencement of the next 3-year investment programme, so April 2026. Hopefully that will be achieved. And I'd encourage anyone, actually, if they can, to look at this consultation that has a vested interest in the ability to put some knowledge to it would be, really beneficial. The aim is to make, well, there's two main principles. One, a simplified approach to funding new flood resilience projects. And the second, proposed approach to prioritising flood resilience projects. And under that, there's going to be three funding principles, which is where it draws out a little bit more of the detail. The previous partnership funding policy was very much based on gaining contributions to help deliver a project, be that from other flood authorities or beneficiaries. There's been a bit of a step change away from that now, and that the first 3 million of any project now will be fully funded. So there wouldn't be the requirement for contributions. And after 3 million, 90% of the value of that project would be fully funded, meaning that there's only that 10% contribution required. So that, for me, is going to give, I feel, significant greater certainty of once a project is started, even when you're looking at the appraisal stage, that it is going to go through and be delivered, rather than we have seen some projects actually failing because we see how costs have escalated, especially with the impact of COVID and then the war in Ukraine. There's been significant inflation which has impacted projects quite badly, and it means that they've been paused or put on hold. I think the only negative that I would take from this slightly is that there is going to have to be prioritisation around projects now, given that there is a much more favourable funding to each individual project when it actually comes online. And we're yet to see actually what the criteria for that prioritisation is going to be. So that's one to wait for. All of our work, the majority of our flood risk management work is risk-based. It's on a risk-based approach, be that within area, be that nationally, and that, I suspect, is where we will also see the prioritisation, or one of the main prioritisations about projects coming forward, is where there is that greatest risk, that is where the money will be spent. And that risk is really borne out by the number of properties that we see at flood risk, both now and into the future with climate change. And the way that this is undertaken in the Environment Agency, we undertake a National Flood Risk Model. Its acronym is NAFRA, and we're in just published NAFRA 2. So this is based on much more detailed data, better data than we've had before. It's also utilising a lot of local modelled information by others that we've been able to incorporate into the national model. And it also takes on board the latest climate change modelling, so that, we are up to date as far as we see what that future risk is going to be. What I would say on modelling is always only as good as the data that goes in at the front end in terms of the information and that you get out at the back end. And so it will always be refined. And 10 years ago we had our first NAFRA, National Flood Risk Assessment Models. Over the 10 years we've been able to refine that. You've got greater power now of computers as well that give much more accurate information, and I'm sure we'll see that change again, a step change again in the next 10 years when we actually would be producing NAFRA 3. So there will always be a change, but hopefully it's getting better. Coming on to your note there, the waterfront strategy, and I also have up there Redbridge to Lymington. The reason I've got it down as Redbridge to Lymington, we have something called the medium-term plan at the Environment Agency, and this is in effect a flood risk programme where all of our schemes are profiled in terms of when they're going to commence, the values that we think they're going to be required to deliver them, and whether they've been approved or not. And the title that we have for what you would determine is the waterfront is Redbridge to Lymington Strategy, which, as we can see, is the red line on the map up there. You'll also see on the map there's a blue line as well going down Southampton Water and around Southampton itself, and that's Southampton Strategy. The reason I wanted to show that, both of those areas in effect require a strategy. There is an existing Southampton strategy, but it has exceeded its life expectancy, should I say. And we're also seeing a bit of a step change in terms of where I was mentioning about where funding we're expected to go, not necessarily to projects, but more to managing existing assets. A lot of strategies are not getting funded. Now, we have this on our programme within area, but we are seeing things like Thames 2100, the River Severn, the Humber Estuary, very large areas. And yes, it is where there is a large population as well. Those strategies are getting funded. So I think what we'll probably look to do, or what we've profiled as now, that both of those strategies would be put together. And I think that's quite sensible and realistic as well, given that it's just a large river, the Southampton Water, and we're looking at both banks, and therefore the impact, if you undertake something on one side, could impact the other. And at the same time, if we're working with people like Associated British Ports, potential of redevelopment, movement, Marchwood, I don't know. All these questions have been around, I know, for quite a long time. But I think if we're looking at a strategy over the next 100 years, it is much more favourable to keep all that together. So just some high-level figures for you at the moment. On our programme, it has a commencement date of 2027-28 to commence what we're looking at is a large strategy. That's not approved at this stage, but it is on the programme, with a 5-year duration and an approximate cost of 5 million. They're just high-level figures, but we've got that on a programme. At present, we're in, I think as I've already really mentioned a little bit earlier, we're in an agreed programme which ends at March 26, and then we enter into the next 3-year programme where that overall 4.2 billion that government is investing has already been agreed, but we are still waiting then for what is going to be determined actually to be within that programme. And each area across the country has been submitting their own programmes where such as this strategy sits, and then that will be prioritised accordingly, and then it feeds back down to area from national. We get the opportunity to make local choices, to try and change some, but this is one of the uncertainties, I guess, that we're waiting and working on. So, although that's, the strategy sits there, it's something we want to be doing, there isn't the certainty that it is going to happen at the moment, so we have some local aspirations that we can start to undertake. We've had a review of the data already, a lot of the flood risk data based on NAFRA 2, which I mentioned earlier. And interestingly, what it's shown with the new revised modelled information which is based over 100 years, the early years, so the first decade or so, the number of properties actually at flood risk identified is slightly lower than it's been before. Now, the risk is always going to be, the actual risk is the same, but the modelled information is slightly less. But when we see into the future, those numbers are increasing higher than what we've seen before, which is showing really that climate change is having quite a significant impact. But that's just a slight step change. So we've been identifying those locations, and I mentioned as well previously that there's a step change as well in terms of trying to deliver, or the ability to deliver a project. If it's under 3 million, it's fully funded. And I think there's probably a greater opportunity for us to deliver smaller, targeted, localised projects in those communities that we see at that greater risk today, rather than just building or entering into a strategy which takes years to develop. So there could be some opportunities here for us. And then the next thing I've got up there about an adaptation pathway for the strategy. We still want to undertake this, and this is something that we can do within my team, within the officers that work in my team. What this will mean is bringing together essentially the stakeholders of organisations and communities that hold relevant information and can support the knowledge gathering to basically build on that modelled information but give us real information on the ground. And this will be involving the Environment Agency, hopefully New Forest District Council, Southampton City Council, Hampshire County Council, Network Rail. It is a quicker way, I think, to gather as much information as we can to understand the risk from all organisations and communities, which is going to then help support targeting the smaller projects to manage that risk. I've got a slide up here. This is my last slide, so I hope I haven't overrun. Some key messages. I think we can all agree we're sort of in a bit of a process in flood risk at the moment of change, with new policies coming in, a new programme commencing next year, and investment priorities. A little bit of uncertainty of how that's going to impact what we can do, but I do think there are going to be opportunities there as well, along with our local aspirations that aren't reliant on the national funding that we can still deliver through our team and with our partners, which then for me is really touching back to what I started at the beginning about how we've worked well in the past, and I suspect how we will continue to do that. So that is it from me. Last slide is questions, and lots of hands.
Yes, Ian, I have one. Thank you very much indeed. Just to try and get some of what you've said together, the strategy at the moment is looking possibly ahead the next 3 years. Am I right? You mentioned a sum of 4.2 billion was intended, but 3 billion of it have been fully funded. Where does the rest come from?
Sorry, the 4.2 billion, I think there's a couple of things you're mentioning there. That the strategy for the waterfront and what we're calling Redbridge to Leamington, including Southampton as well, that's profiled to commence 27-28, so yes, in approximately 2 years' time. The 4.2 billion is the agreement from government for the next 3-year flood risk programme, which would start in 26-27 and go on for 3 years from there. You mentioned the 3 million is the threshold from which projects lower than that won't need external contributions to get them delivered, and above that value, if you had, say, a £10 million scheme, 3 million would be fully funded, and the other 7 million would only require an extra 10%. So 90%.
How much from New Forest District Council?
Not. That's one of the big questions, isn't it? We don't know at this moment in time. For the strategy itself, I'd profiled a value of 5 million. So if you wanted to work it out from that, there's 2 million. It would be 90% funded. So of that 2 million, there would still be. I'm trying to work that out in my head now. I'm going to do
200,000.
I think as a strategy, it's probably fully funded. It's the strategy, wasn't it?
Possibly.
Yeah.
It's whether it gets that
Yeah,
funding or not.
Right, thank you. Alan?
Thank you, Councillor Glass. On one of your early slides, it mentioned healthier air and water quality.
Right at the
I
beginning.
haven't heard anything about that tonight, but with the filth that's coming out of our sewers straight into the rivers and sea, I think I'd like to hear something about that and some action taken. Thank you.
I could take that away for you. That doesn't sit in my remit under flood risk management. That absolutely sits in our environmental side of the organisation. And yes, we are working with the water authorities to try and improve that, but I can't sit here and deny that I see pollution as well that's occurring and something needs to be done that's better, but there's a lot of policy that we have to follow in terms of legal requirements for us to bring the water authorities to, I suppose, face the realisation of that pollution that's been occurring. And I would say that actually out of our office in the environment side, I think it was probably 18 months or so ago now that we actually managed to take Southern Water to court and win a settlement of 92 million, which is not insignificant, but I agree, we really don't want to see it happening in the first place.
I've got a list. So Alan, you're next, please.
Alan?
Alvin.
Hi, Alvin Reid represented Tiptoe, Horde, Leverton, Milford and Keyhaven, a beautiful part of the country. I'm just interested in this £3 million. It sounds like Steve would love to have £3 million, I'm sure he would. What does £3 million buy you? And how much work is in £3 million?
Oof, that's a very good question.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think of a £3 million project.
10 miles of coast.
Yeah, I might sort of add a bit to that. So Steve Cook, Service Manager for Coastal. I think, Albert, it's very much project based, and depending on work, it's difficult to say what you'll get for 3 million because it depends where you're building it and what you're building. I mean, the projects we're looking at for Milford through the Christchurch strategy, I think looking at Peter in the order of 7 to 10 million ish. So, it's adding quite a good sum, as Ian said, compared to the current funding mechanism, and with the other 90%, things may be a bit more positive, but as Ian said, there's a priority sort of process that would have to be applied still, because that 4.2 billion nationally is, to cover the country. So you're still going to have to go through a priority system for that. And as Ian said, that's consultation at the moment, so it's not an agreed change, but it's certainly the proposed change. And on the face of it, I think it's probably quite positive, but it won't resolve all our problems.
Thank you.
Adam, you're next.
Thank you. Councillor Adam Parker, Brockenhurst and Denny Lodge. Thank you very much for coming, Ian, and your timely presentation. I have to say some of what you've said is just music to my ears, specifically the vast sums of money that apparently are going to go to local flood action schemes. Brockenhurst, which I represent for the uninitiated, is very vulnerable to flooding and has been badly hit a number of times in the last few years. You mentioned about the homes being a factor in funding and the home risk. Well, I've actually seen the high watermark on the outside of some property walls, so it's a serious problem in the village. The village has almost become marooned at times, actually, believe it or not, with obviously enormous repercussions for businesses, lives, deliveries, etc. I don't have access to a projector, unfortunately, but I could share with you drone footage of extensive flooding historically around the Burley Road and all over the village. It's a real problem. Just as a bit of background for why I'm jumping in my seat and so excited that you're here, after an outrageous 7-year delay in publishing Purgatory, I was successful in helping to conjure the release of a subsidiary of the Environment Agency, the Southern Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. I don't know if you know it. They did a report on flooding in Brockenhurst, and it was languishing in publishing Purgatory for 7 years until I heard about it. I fired off a furious screed, made a few phone calls to the right people, and lo and behold, it was released, thank goodness. The village itself, Brockenhurst, is impressively supported with a large number of willing and able volunteers in the Flood Action Group and beyond, and the village's Resilience Working Group. But businesses and landowners are also willing to help and pay for it. They just needed this report to come out sooner than 7 years and to get the go-ahead for their plans, which includes storing excess rainwater in ponds at the golf course. Now, I don't want to go on because it's very hot and stuffy in this room, but basically, we would love to get the Environment Agency around the table with the Flood Action Group, with local ecologists, with the parish council, and see what can, and give us some money as well. That would be really good. Let's make it happen.
Thank you for that. As it happens, that would be me sitting around the table. And I am more than happy to do that. In terms of the 7 years, that report, as far as I'm aware, was only completed the end of last year, middle of last year. So yes, and no, it wasn't. There was probably there may have been talk about it, and yes, it was funded by the RFCC, the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee. So that's local levy, which in effect is local authority money that they manage and distribute to where they see that, and obviously that secured the ability to deliver that report. Yeah, but I'm sure you have my contact details. Yes. I will be the person to contact, and I'd be happy to sit.
Just one very brief follow-up point, that I'm mindful that the climate crisis is worsening. In 2 years, perhaps this council's going to be mothballed. Time is of the essence. So, you know, let's talk. Let's get around a table and make it happen. That'll be really good. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Adam. A little bit personal, but we're dealing with a strategy, but I'll let you get on. Next in the list is Malcolm, please.
Thank you. I'm Malcolm. I represent Hythe and Dibden, which is in the area of Redbridge to Lymington, and it regularly floods on the high tides. They're part of the village. What I wanted you, if you could clarify something. In your presentation, which is very good, thank you, you talked something about changing priorities in the strategy. Is it something to do with housing? I didn't quite, probably with a bit depth, pick up what you were getting out of that, because in the area that I represent, we're on a peninsula. We have Southampton Water on one side, the A326 and National Park in the other. So there isn't a lot of room. There is some room for extra houses, and there is, I'm sure they'll build them, but there isn't a lot of room to vastly increase the housing population. But 20,000 people live there anyway. So I want to understand how the impact of that will change is going to affect putting flood defences eventually in our area so the people who live near the water don't get flooded out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing, when I mentioned that there was a change, the change was to bring in two strategies into one.
Oh, right. I didn't hear that, sorry.
And so at the moment there's a Southampton Coastal Strategy,
yeah,
which is dates back to 2012.
Yeah.
It needs updating, it needs reviewing, and it's logical that given, especially the locality that you're talking about is opposite in terms of on the watercourse there, Southampton Water, if something was done on one side of Southampton Water, it could have a detrimental effect on the other side. And we need to understand if that is going to occur, and therefore actually looking at this as a whole, I think is going to give her a much better understanding of that risk. Also, I mentioned, what I'm seeing is that larger strategies are the ones that are getting funded, and hence why we've taken the decision within area to combine the two, to make it a larger strategy, to give it that profile that hopefully that will receive the funding. But
No,
sorry.
You come back one point. I totally understand that, and I see where we're going at. But the other side of the water is one large dock area.
Yes.
Our side is field, there will be some docks, I suppose, coming, field, houses, marinas, and reclaimed land. So two very different environments. So what you would defend in Southampton is very different to how you would approach it over on our side of the water.
Absolutely. And that's totally understandable. I think even, I'll take the example, and please, Steve, correct me here if I'm wrong, but if I was looking at the current strategy of Hurstpit to Lymington, that's been broken down into different areas because there will be different interventions along each of those areas. So I would see exactly the same, but what we need to understand is if you do something in one location, it potentially could impact the other, and therefore you need to work in both areas, which is why bringing them together is the way we want to go. And at the same time, I hope, if we can look at, I've got, the flood risk data, the number of properties that we're seeing at risk at the moment, that we may well be able to, through an adaptive approach now, start to put in place the delivery of smaller schemes, potentially before any strategy.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. I've got two more people left. Please, Stephanie, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. When I was elected in 2019, I was very optimistic. I was going to tackle the flooding in our area, which is Hythe, on the waterfront. We can see the water, raises up almost above a wall and sloshes over. And one year, about 2 years ago, the village flooded so badly that all the businesses ready for Christmas dinners had to cancel. And it was a very big, disappointment to everybody. We've also got Shore Road, which is so deep you couldn't even wear your Wellingtons in it. It would go over the top of your Wellingtons. We had to walk along Shore Road. So I think I remember you saying to us, it's the environmental agency, not the district council. So I'm very pleased to meet you tonight and again copy Adam and say that we've got an enthusiastic crowd of people with a very knowledgeable man in Hythe that we'd really like to meet you and see what can be done to stop our homes and villages and businesses being flooded. So I've wrote down your numbers that you've given us, and if there's anything else we can pass on to the residents that are trying to get some help with it, that'd be good.
Okay, thank you. And as I've sort of been saying, that is something that my team will be looking at, those risks, understanding that historical data, and actually when we start an adaptation pathway, then that is talking to the communities and gaining that knowledge and understanding so that we better understand what we could potentially do.
Being able to record that they've been flooded would be good as well, wouldn't it?
Yes. Evidence like that is vital.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. The final question on this subject, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to say on a lighter and perhaps a final note, Michael Thierry from Ringwood. I was greatly comforted by your map, which clearly indicates we will not need to rename Ringwood on Sea.
Yes, okay, Michael, thank you for your input.
On a personal note, I hope not, because I live there. Well,
don't talk to me, I'm your local councillor.
Might catch on. Right, thank you very much, Ian, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, the reform of the Planning Committee. It's a verbal update and presentation. And James Carpenter, please.
Thank you, Chair. James Carpenter, Strategic Director for Place Operations and Sustainability. And every now and then I like to remind myself my life is not bins, and once upon a time. The microphone is on.
Swap the artist. Swap the man.
Is that better, Councillor? Okay, right then. Okay, so James Carpenter, Strategic Director of Place Operations and Sustainability. And every now and then I do try and remind myself that my life isn't all about wheelie bins. And once upon a time, I did learn how to do a bit of colouring in at town planning school. So you've got me this evening, but able in the wings, Tim Geimer, our Assistant Director for Place Development as well. Tim is controlling the presentation from the back of the room, so I will talk to it as Tim goes. We really just wanted to bring this topic to you. So you may or may not be aware, we hope you are aware from emails that we've sent out, that government has got some planned proposed reforms of planning committees, obviously planning committees and planning being one of the main functions of many councils, but particularly district councils. And within that, there are some very clear functions and thoughts as to what they're trying to achieve. Next slide, Tim, please. So, not my words, but government's clearly what they are setting out to achieve, and as stated in their original manifesto, is 1.5 million new homes by 2025, with initiatives including mandatory housing targets, acceleration of house building, consideration of grey belts, which is land within what we know as the green belt that may or may not be more suitable for housing and may need to be considered going forward. And the implementation of a planning and infrastructure bill to streamline the delivery of new homes and critical infrastructure. And those are very clearly expressed by government as their views as to how they're going to accelerate house building. Linked to that, of course, you've got the kind of consultation that's come out and an overview of those consultations that we've got. So first consultation to be aware of is a consultation on planning committees, and again, in government's words, to streamline the planning process and improve efficiency. I'll leave their words with you. But also some changes to the site thresholds around small and medium-sized developments and how that may or may not help small and medium-sized enterprises, smaller house builders access the housing market, access the housing delivery market, and again, accelerate housing delivery. And obviously, members, you'll all be aware from many of the planning briefings we've given you around kind of government figures and government targets around housing growth and the 30,015 houses that we've been asked to find here in the New Forest. That it is not a small challenge here in this district and this patch. As I say, there are fundamentally, as part of this consultation, a proposal for reforms of planning committees, and as I say, we wanted to bring that to your attention as a place panel, just as an overview and obviously to take any comments. As I've set out on the slides there, some kind of key points, a national scheme of delegation. So you'll obviously be aware that within this council's constitution, within this council's scheme of delegation, various things are delegated to officers and your planning department, and obviously there are various routes for planning applications to be called to planning committees. The proposals would seek to set out a national scheme of delegation. It would seek to set out the size and composition of planning committees, and it would also seek to set out that there be mandatory training for committee members, which is based there on a narrative of improving decision-making quality. Within that, 2 tiers of applications are kind of proposed, and this is obviously something that the consultation will be seeking views on. A tier A, within which, if it's an application within that tier, that should be delegated to officers in all cases, householder applications, non-material amendments, approval of conditions and the like, some examples there. Also looking to introduce what they call a tier B, which is most other types of application, and those must be delegated to officers unless the chief planner or chair of committee agree it should go to the committee on a gateway test, and that is a model that is used in various councils across the country. So there is some experience behind that that's perhaps driving some of that thinking. And obviously the consultation is asking various questions, but one of the key questions is whether those criteria be set by which decisions take applications to committee should be considered. And there's some factors there to consider in terms of economic, social and environmental significance, the three key pillars upon which planning is always based, or whether that raises a significant planning matter having regard to the council's development plan. So just to try and put that in the New Forest context, and if anyone asks me to try and do sums live on YouTube, I can assure you I won't be trying. So in the last 18 months, this district council's planning committee has considered 102 items. So just to put that into perspective against that Tier A and Tier B we set out, 60 of those would not have gone to the committee under that proposed consultation. 33 would have gone through the gateway process. And 9 were special control applications, so related to things like tree preservation orders, listed building consent, advertisement control, etc. So some question over that. I think it's probably also just worth noting that a remaining third would have gone through a gateway process. So actually that level of delegation could have well been higher than what we've set out there on the slide. So the other thing just to be aware in the consultation is talk of restructuring planning committees and giving some guidance around how planning committees should be structured. And again, government's words, not ours, the consultation's words, not ours, but smaller committees would help improve the quality of debate whilst recognising the need for political balance. The consultation therefore proposes a maximum size of committees of 11 members. Committees may be smaller if that works best locally, with no minimum proposed to be set, so 11 would look to be the maximum. And again, just for some local context, our current planning committee has 13 members. Another thing that's proposed in the Planning Infrastructure Bill is mandatory training for committee members. Now, clearly, we always encourage our members to come to our training sessions, and we're always keen as an officer corps to help support both members of the planning committee and members generally across the council to understand planning, because aside from wheelie bins, it probably is the thing that excites people the most in most council areas. So I think that's probably why we're so keen to ensure that our officers and members work so closely together on planning. But some options there that have been proposed, be that a national certification scheme produced by the ministry and potentially involving an online test for certification, or potentially a local-based approach where the local planning authority provides that certification. The government's preference, it is noted, is for a national certification on the basis it ensures independence and reduces said burden on individual LPAs. But obviously, there's a view perhaps from your officers that would probably still require some more localised training, particularly in a location as unique as the New Forest. So views will be sought on that. Just to also flag a separate working paper, so not subject of the consultation per se, but relevant. You'll obviously be aware that various schemes are typecast by whether they're kind of small or minor applications, or whether they're large applications. And again, linked to that kind of push by government to enable SMEs to perhaps better access the kind of housing delivery market, to reduce perhaps some of the dependency on some of the kind of big, large-scale house builders. They're proposing to introduce what they call a medium site threshold of 10 to 49 dwellings or up to 1 hectare in site. So I think that's probably just worth bearing in mind. It's not really subject to the consultation, but arguably it does have an impact on that kind of Tier A, Tier B angle. So, as I say, we wanted to kind of bring this to Place Panel to give you an opportunity to have a conversation, and Derek's been really, as Cabinet member, Councillor Derek Tibb has been very supportive of that, and also working with Councillor Christine Ward as the Chair of Planning Committee. So we also followed last week's Planning Committee with a session with the sitting members of the Planning Committee to seek some initial feedback, and I know some councillors who are on that Planning Committee are also in the room tonight, so hopefully we've we've covered what your kind of initial thinking was there. Planning committee members in the room, there felt like there was some potential agreement around the introduction of tiers for a scheme of delegation. Perhaps I feel that some things do come to our planning committee that you might question. So actually, I think that was certainly raised, but also very much linked to that, and perhaps within that kind of democratic context, how the accountability for decision making would be processed if members perhaps didn't have quite as much of a role, or had a diminished role in terms of the kind of scale and the number and the scrutiny of applications coming forward. On the kind of key points of planning committee size and composition, I think there was a very clear steer from the planning committee that for geographies like the New Forest, and to ensure a geographic representation of the district, given our kind of rural and segregated and segmented character in some respects, that very much that is something that is reflected in size and composition of planning committees. And broadly on the mandatory training point, broad support for member training from those who sit on planning committee. Certification was encouraged, and I think all the members on the planning committee would probably recognise, as we see, the amount of time and energy and effort it goes into being a member of that planning committee, and the level of kind of insight and keeping up to date with policy and legislation and changing things like that really mean that members benefit from that support that officers and training provides. So that's it. So obviously there'll be an opportunity for further member feedback in this room. So the slide here is not to open the conversation, but just to say that is why you're here tonight. If there are any further comments, thoughts, feedback, having a bit of an overview tonight. But before we do, just thought it'd also be helpful to set out where we are in terms of pathway and next steps. So in bold, we are here tonight, a discussion with Place and Sustainability Over and Scrutiny panel. We also have an agents panel scheduled for the 2nd of July, where we will be welcoming many of our kind of regular users, our frequent flyers of the planning service, to say those agents locally who engage perhaps most often with the services of the planning department and encounter the planning committee perhaps more often than many. So again, get an extra perspective. We're going to review any feedback we've received by email, and I have had some feedback in advance from members across the council, so thank you for that in advance. And then a response is going to be prepared to be sent by the Cabinet Member for Planning and Economy, so Councillor Derek Tip on behalf of NFDC. And we're working to a deadline of the 23rd of July. That's the deadline for that submission. So that's really just to give you a bit of a flavour. Chair, it's in your gift, of course, now to obviously open the floor. But myself and Tim will be happy to take questions and do our best to answer those if that's helpful.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I'll go first then.
Alvin.
Thank you, Alvin Reid again. I'm just worried about the theme of that is taking away democratic accountability. We are all here to represent the people in the ward that we represent, and taking away that is a major step, I believe, in the wrong direction. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that, Jim or James or Tim.
I mean, clearly, I think that's really a clear view that we've had expressed across the board so far, and I wouldn't expect members to take a different view on that. I think that's a view we would have expected, and I'm fairly certain that will be forming part of the response that we draft on behalf of the Cabinet Member.
James. Alan.
One of the things I've noticed, because I spent 12 years on planning, quite enjoyed it, but when it comes up to reading out what the parish council says, it's very often taken as if it's the Vicar of Dibley writing in, not a responsible parish council. In an area like we're in, we've actually had someone say about explosion zone. Well, that's total stupidity and we all know it. But those sort of things are going on because the person saying it didn't know the area. Therefore, can we put emphasis on the comments from the local people, i.e. the parish councils, in making our decisions? Otherwise, we're going to have someone from Ringwood, what's happening with Fawley Village, and that will be a total waste of time. So can I just ask that parish councils are taken seriously Our particular parish has got £8.25 million worth of properties, sports halls and things. So we're not dibbly. Thank you.
Yes, I got it. Thank you, Alan. Peter, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Peter Armstrong. Very similar to Alan, because we were on a planning committee at Fawley yesterday. Because basically some of these the first tier will not go to planning committee, from my understanding. And it's going to an officer who necessarily doesn't know the area, because it won't be judged by the planning committee, where there will be, if you're doing it representing the forest, where there will be someone who knows the area. I know when I was on planning committee, you know, when it was in a certain area, we had some councillors, and probably still do, who knew their area exactly very, very well and could comment on it, which would help the other people on the planning committee. My concern is that some of these will be at a lower level that won't even reach planning committee when the parish objects. And what training would there be for officers to adapt to that? That would be where my concern is.
Thank you, Peter. James, do you want to reply?
Yeah, if I can hopefully offer some comments on that. I mean, I think it's fair to say you do have a very good officer corps here who do know the district. You've got a very long-standing corps of officers. I think linked to that, the key thing for me is that training and development. You know, absolutely. A planning committee is there to represent the whole district, and perhaps, you know, that's something that might need differentiating. So, you know, yes, local knowledge is important. It's always important as part of the planning process. That's why local communities, parish and town councils are consultees on planning applications to help inform that decision-making process. You know, fundamentally, I think that's really where that kind of training and support of a planning committee to ensure that if you're from a part of the district and we're looking at applications across the whole district, how can we ensure that a committee has that better understanding of the district as a whole? So, you know, what kind of programme is there around actually getting out, understanding the district, meeting with the towns and parishes and understanding the issues as they see them?
What I'm saying, James, is that tier one, some of the objections would no longer come to planning committee.
That is correct. That is exactly what government are looking to set up.
That's my concern.
Yep. Noted. Thank you.
Next.
Yes, Malcolm.
I'm not going to repeat any of the points we made in the previous consultation. I've just got a simple one, really. Taking into account the government's agenda, what actual impact are our views going to take in this consultation? Or is it just going to be railroaded through and there and done? Is there any listening to the people, listening to people's representatives, or is this really a done deal and we feel nice by expressing our opinion, but are we going to make a difference? Because everybody, regardless of political persuasion, has looked at this from a similar viewpoint.
Thank you, Malcolm. And yeah, I'd agree. That certainly does feel there's quite a strong consensus across all the conversations that we've had so far. I can't say whether government will listen. I can't say whether they will stop and reflect based on feedback. But I don't think we would be doing our job as officers properly to not give you the opportunity to make those representations and to put those in the most constructive and positive forms we can for this council. I do try.
Thank you, Malcolm. Michael?
Thank you, Chairman. Speaking as the chairman of a planning committee for a parish council, and also speaking as a member of New Forest National Park Planning Committee, one of the things that I'm very, very conscious of is that parish councils have a different perspective to town and district. And some of the reasons that they give for refusal, some of the reasons that they give for approval, bear no relationship at all to any kind of planning guidance. And I read so many of them where it's, we feel this, we feel that, but there is no substance to support the position that they are taking. And I think one of the things that is certainly essential That is, that parish councils who have a planning committee, and not all of them do need to have training. And it is beholden on the clerks to elicit the help of New Forest District Council officers who I'm sure would be prepared on occasions to meet with parish councils, perhaps a group of parish councils in the same area, so that they could have as members a better understanding of how the system works. And I feel frustrated often reading some of the views of parish councils. Might I move on, with your permission, Chairman, to the subject matter? And I did a troll of objections to the government proposals, and in essence you can almost knock them into one hat. It is that local councillors and members of the public are concerned that proposed changes could lead to more applications being determined by officers, potentially bypassing local input, especially for sensitive and controversial small-scale developments. Mm-hmm. And there is a danger there. And somehow or other we need to work through this, or the government does in its proposal, to ensure that even the smallest of application gets the attention that it warrants and certainly needs. The two-tier system, I have some reservations about the gateway arrangement. And again, doing a troll, this has not been the panacea for a good number of councils. They have felt that the decision by the Chief Planning Officer and the Chairman of Planning was too prescriptive. It was just two people. And there have been occasions where the suggestion has been that perhaps it's too cosy a relationship. And I would be recommending that certainly the Chief Planning Officer and the Chair of Committee, but there also should be at least 3 other members of the Planning Committee to be able to assess whether or not the planning application goes through the gateway. It should not be left solely with the Chief Planning Officer and the Chairman of Planning, no matter how gorgeous she is and how lovely she is. I would want to say that. I've got one other point to make, if with your permission, Chairman. It is correct that councillors should receive training in respect of the work that they undertake. I have no problem at all with that, and sometimes I have been embarrassed in this chamber when I sat on Planning Committee of some of the utterances that I heard from New Forest District Council planning members, which were an embarrassment to themselves and an embarrassment to me. And had I had a shotgun, no, I mustn't say that. Let me now proceed one step further. And this, I'm afraid to say, is for you, Mr. Carpenter, directly. It is inequitable that Planning Committee members should have some certificate to show that they are proven to be able to sit on a planning committee. Yet there is no planning officer that has to demonstrate that he or she has the correct qualification, which should be a planning qualification other in a university degree in planning, environment and development, or urban planning and property development. Because planning officers will be able to make far-reaching decisions, as my friend and colleague has mentioned to us tonight, but we have no idea what their qualification is. So you expect councillors to have qualification. I'm expecting that officers will have a similar qualification to justify the role that they are going to undertake. Now, if that's a hard nut to crack, Mr. Carpenter, I do apologise, but nowhere in the submissions that we are looking at is there any suggestion that planning officers should be equally qualified as members of a planning committee.
Excellent point.
Thank you, Michael.
Chairman, I'm sorry to...
No. James, did you want to respond?
Yeah, no, I think it is probably just worth flagging. More than happy to share the job descriptions and the perfect person specifications for our planning department. And obviously, a large majority of our planning staff are chartered town planners. They are chartered under the provisions of the Royal Town Planning Institute. And the basis of acquiring that qualification is both a degree and a master's degree. So yeah, I can't comment on my beauty, but I at least certainly have the qualifications, as do many of my colleagues.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Michael. That's everybody. Right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll move on now to item 6, adoption of New Forest Skills Plan. And Tim Geimer is going to run this one with us.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Tim Geimer, Assistant Director for Place Development. Tonight, I just want to run through with you the emerging New Forest Skills Action Plan, covering the next 5 years. This is the first Skills Action Plan for the New Forest, which has been prepared. And just to explain a little bit about why we're preparing a New Forest Skills Action Plan. Members may recall a Cabinet decision of April last year, where some priorities for what the legacy should be of the three ports were identified, and the key element of that was about the legacy of jobs and skills coming out from the three ports. And clearly the new, there are new economic development opportunities emerging more widely than just the free port, including the green economy and many other areas. But it was felt that time was right to start work on a skills action plan. We are also mindful of the fact that there is a feeling that the challenges and opportunities in the New Forest are unique. Unlike many other parts of Hampshire and further afield, the New Forest does have particular opportunities and challenges which more traditional skills programmes don't always meet those needs. In preparing the Skills Action Plan, therefore, there was felt to be benefit to both residents and businesses. And putting together the different providers, the different skills providers which there are in the forest to collaborate more effectively than perhaps has been seen in the past. And then finally, we also know that there are various opportunities for funding bids which we can take, but that needs to be informed by having something which says what our skills needs are and what we think the priorities should be. So that's the basis and the context of preparing a skills action plan. Just moving on and hoping my screen works. There we go. So in the winter of 2024, we appointed consultants, ECOS Consultancy, who have experience in working in very similar economies to the New Forest, understood what the New Forest was about and gave us confidence to appoint them to undertake this work. And the work was originally focused on undertaking desktop work and primary research to identify some of the data which there is for the New Forest about some of the qualifications that our residents have, what employers were looking for, and then following that up with interviews and workshops with both the sixth form colleges, schools, the county, and many different education providers and businesses indeed who were working and living in the New Forest. We tested some of the emerging findings with them and identified some preliminary approaches to what could be the key actions emerging. Does this feel right? And that helped to shape a draft plan, which we then shared with those same people that we'd had interviews and workshops with over the last year, or 6 months. A revised plan was subsequently produced, and that's what's in front of you today for your consideration. So some of the challenges in the New Forest, I won't dwell on these, but you'll be familiar with many of them. And they include an ageing population, and also, conversely, younger people leaving the area to live and study or indeed work elsewhere. There is an observed decline in some of our key industries. There are skill shortages also in key sectors, including health and social care, construction, marine and engineering. There is an identified gender pay gap, which again, the report talks about, and also barriers to skills delivery, including, we know, affordability of housing, limited public transport across the New Forest, and particularly in some pockets, and digital accessibility. Some priority groups were also identified in the New Forest, areas which we felt, or the consultants felt, were particularly relevant that we should be focusing on. And they include women either entering or re-entering the workforce, young people, particularly those not in education, employment or training. You'll see the acronym NEETs, and that's what that stands for. And there are certainly clusters of those across the New Forest. People aged 50 or over, job changes, people who are in one career and actually go, I need to move, or I want to pivot and move into a different area. And of course, aspiring entrepreneurs and those seeking self-employment. So off the back of that, a vision and objectives were prepared for the plan, and the vision is in front of you on the screen of a skilled, resilient workforce, driving inclusive and nature-positive growth. The objectives which are listed on the screen, I'm not going to repeat them verbatim, help to then inform setting the actions. And moving on to the next slide, a total of, I think, 32 actions were identified in the Skills Action Plan, which can be attributed to 7 strategic themes. And they range from aligning skills with emerging opportunities, lifelong learning and upskilling, inclusive growth, collaboration, making sure we work more effectively in the future with both the education providers, with businesses, but also community groups. And then also encouraging business and entrepreneurship, so start-up businesses, move-on businesses as well. And then, crucially, monitoring and evaluation of those. We need to actually test and make sure that the things which we're trying to do are delivering what they say. I wouldn't go through over 32 actions today, but some examples of those are listed on the screen in front of you, and they include the ideas of delivering boot camps, upskilling programs for key sectors, targeted support for particular groups, including those young people that we've talked about before, and then supporting new business startups and leadership and management training. The priority groups which I talked about, again, particular actions are identified to make sure that we address those needs which have been identified. Crucially, delivering the plan. It's all well and good having a plan, but how do you actually deliver it? And one of the key actions which we want to take forward with your input and then Cabinet's approval for would be the setting up of a New Forest Skills Group. And that would be a New Forest-wide skills group, not just the Waterside, but including the Avon Valley and going up into the Cranbourne Chase area as well, to make sure that across the New Forest there's a coordinated and collaborative approach to skills delivery, which brings colleges, employers and other authorities together to ensure that we're delivering skills which complement what's needed, that don't duplicate each other, and actually then when we're working on new funding bids, that there's a coordination to that too. Moving on to funding, which is an important issue, the Skills Action Plan has a number of short-term actions which are already funding has been identified for, but there are more funding opportunities available, which we will continue to bid for. The skills actions which are already commissioning are work on NEETs, not in education, employment and training. You may recall UK Shared Prosperity Fund. There was money allocated from that to target skills training in that area. But crucially, the Skills Action Plan provides a basis, a foundation on which we as a council can make bids to central government, to the Freeport and to others to say, this is what this community needs at this time. The progress will be tracked through regular reporting, and we're not pretending the Skills Action Plan won't need to be updated in due course. This is version 1, and we'll be very keen to keep it as a live document which is updated to reflect what the communities need over the coming years. Final slide is what does success look like? And here are some thoughts just on a screen for you, but I hope that all of those which are listed there resonate with yourselves as something which we want to try and deliver. I said final slide, but there's actually just one more, which is just a reminder that the next steps are that subject to your observations and comments, we will be taking this item to Cabinet on the 2nd of July, recommending adoption. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Short list at the moment. Peter, you're first.
Thank you, Councillor Peter Armstrong. I'm so pleased this has come forward that there is a report, because James will probably remember I spoke at he's nodding his head at a meeting about this. But you mentioned about deprived areas. You don't mention Blackfield. There was also a deprived area in New Milton area on the deprivation indices in the New Forest. That, you know, I'm not sure on education, because you probably looked at the deprived area on education. And on that, but you also mentioned schools. But I notice in the report that it only mentions the two colleges. It doesn't mention schools, which is a matter I brought up a year ago. And James said, yes, we will look at and talk to schools as well. I see they're not in this group that has been put together. We have some tremendous schools, you know, before they go into college level across the forest. And James assured me when I asked the question over a year ago that schools would be included as well. So I'm just wondering what's happened with that.
Chair, if I may, just on that latter
Yes,
point.
please do, Tim.
On theme 4, there is a collaboration and community engagement. We do acknowledge that we will be looking to work with schools, colleges, training providers, local authorities, local employers and community organisations to shape curriculum, offer placements and influence strategic skills planning. Working with schools is absolutely crucial. The colleges know that. The colleges are working with the schools at the moment, and we're looking to ensure that we are more effective and joined up going forward than we even are now.
But will they not have any representation on this group pulling together?
The composition of the group has yet to be fully determined, but we'd be very keen to ensure that we have, it may not be every school, but an education representation, more than one, would be absolutely essential on this group.
Someone from Hampshire, as it stands.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Then,
Tim, thank you. It's a very full, clear, comprehensive report that meets my ABC accurate, brief and clear of a report, and can you thank the officers and the consultant for doing that. My concern is one of the slides said funding is expected to come from several sources. What's the plan if funding doesn't come from them sources?
So, Chair, with your permission, the actions which are in the short term, many of those are funded at the moment. As we talked about already, there's funding for this financial year for many of those. For future years, it is uncertain, but there are various funding streams which we intend to draw from. The Local Skills Infrastructure Fund, LSIF, I think it's called, is one of those. We are confident that there will be opportunities here to be more efficient, actually, in delivering skills going forward, because there is a view that sometimes there are differing skills providers working on similar things. And so actually there's an opportunity here to ensure that one skills and education provider is working in one area more effectively, and that we can coordinate and use that money which is perhaps overlapping to deliver better quality skills which are meeting community needs. So I'm not pretending that the funding challenges are not significant, but this document and this work of convening a skills group will help us to be much more effective in going forward. Thank you.
thank you, Tim. Stephanie, you're next.
Yeah, this has really raised my interest. This is actually what I did for 20 years. I worked with E2E and NEET back to business, which actually was taking women that perhaps hadn't got the education when they finished school. And there's so many doctors' secretaries and school secretaries that we trained. So they used to actually come all day from 9:30 to 3, I think, so they could go and meet their children. The whole setup was absolutely amazing. We had school sessions at Calshot in St George's at the time. We also were at Heather Road. There was a place there which was all geared up with all the computers. So this is going to be a really big thing to actually copy that. But if you could, the results were amazing. And children that perhaps don't like school liked training to work, and that's what my speciality was within Hampshire County Couch was actually a lot of it was education other than at school and things like that, and the referral units. But the adult women was a really rewarding part of it. And of course now we wouldn't be able to say adult women, we'd be able to say adults, you know, so that men and women came to the classes and ended up with respectable qualifications like, I don't know, the RSA or, you know, all the different things we did, MBQs, things like that. I used to teach all of that. So I'll be interested in this.
Thank you, Stephanie. Alan, you're next.
That's good. Yeah. I've retired from business now, but I've built up an awful lot of friends in mainly engineering in the area. And I take Peter's point that to get youngsters in apprenticeships and things, well, if they're from Carshot, they stand no chance because there's a bus about once every millennium. But the main thing is, talking to a few companies recently, they are having to close because they can't get journeymen, fully well-trained people, hands-on, plumbers, tool makers, millers, whatever. They can't get the people. So I think this programme is so urgent that we've got to find the funding from somewhere, and anything I can do to help it, I would very much like to. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Malcolm, you're last.
Thank you. This is a really good report. I read it and I think it's full of lots of really interesting detail, data and so forth. And you know, it's very well put together and it's great aspirational and I think all tribute for putting it together. However, there's a but, right? It's all about we're raising expectations. What concerns me is where are these people going to work? We have 1,900 people on unemployment benefit. That's 1%, give or take, of the population, which is very small. The Freeport, the only part of the Freeport that seemed to have anything that would have a large number of employees was South Waterside, which is now not happening. When APB moved their car transport business over to Marchwood, it's not very labour intensive, but there will be some new jobs, but most of it will come with them. We were told a statistic in a meeting that Marchwood Port had generated 16 new jobs in the last 2 to 3 years. So the Freeport is not turning out to be the employment panacea that it was sold as, so that's not there. Because we have a national park in the centre, we are not going to attract heavy industry to employ people. The plus side is we're employing our youngsters to go and work somewhere else. But it's when you see what success looks like. And because we haven't got that local business, we may not then attract the funding that you need to put it in place. Because it is a really good scheme, it's all credit for that. But it's the end game that worries me a little bit. If you could sort of reassure me or answer that.
Chair, if I may come back on that, absolutely. This work is going to be complemented by the economic development strategy, which needs updating, and I absolutely hear what you have to say, and I hope that the strategy, which we're just beginning to start work on, will reassure you that the work will complement this skills action plan.
Right. Thank you, Tim. A weighty plan, quite frankly, and somewhat overdue, I should think, probably. I'm sorry, another question, Michael?
If I may make a comment. Much of what Councillor Wade just said merits a great deal of consideration. He rattled through at pace, but when you begin to dissect it, there are many points there which really we ought to be taking on board. I'd like to make the comment that, unfortunately, I did not find this report balanced. The Solent Freeport is mentioned over 30 times. Ringwood and Fordingbridge is not mentioned. Neither is New Milton that I could find, or even the outer reaches of Livington barely come in for comment. And so I have a concern that we have a report which basically is a good report, but it is not balanced. It doesn't cover the whole of the New Forest. It is selective, dealing with the Solent free port and, in essence, promoting that particular side of the forest. But the forest is an enormous commonwealth of communities, and one senses that before this report goes much further, we do need to be looking at what some of the other areas have to offer, rather than concentrating on the Solent free port. Can I just make one further comment, Chairman? As someone who had a business in Ringwood for over 30 years and mixed with the business community, when we did meet, one of the statements that was often made, and I know you will want to address this, is that so many people were unemployable. They did not have the basic skills to be able to apply and get a job and keep it. And I think Councillor Wade, in fairness, alluded to that. So we do have an uphill task. We do have an uphill task. And I'm not totally certain that our schools and colleges are fully preparing youngsters for a commercial, retail and industrial world. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Michael. Tim, would you like to respond?
Yeah, if I may, and then James may come in and just bolster this. But the references to the Freeport are acknowledging that the Freeport is a significant opportunity for the waterside and further afield. And I say further afield because the zone of the Freeport influence, I can't remember the exact catchment term, extends a long way into the New Forest. It's not designed to be only a waterside benefit. You can, the opportunities for funding initiatives go almost to the Avon Valley and beyond from recollection. I don't have the map in front of me at the moment. I do understand your concern, Councillor, and but I would just reassure you that the reason why we're looking to set up a New Forest skills group is because we are determined that we pay as much attention to the opportunities and the challenges on the Avon Valley and the likes of the villages of Martin and Rockbourne. No, but I do understand it. The report has not been deliberately targeted on a particular geography. We're deliberately trying to talk about the New Forest as a whole. So I'm hoping that if you do a word search on New Forest, you will find quite a lot of references to that. I do acknowledge that on the Freeport, there are a number of references, but that recognises the challenges which there are and the opportunities there are in delivering skills arising from the Freeport. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Right, if there's no more questions, we move to page 5 on your papers, gentlemen, where we've got recommendation. The comments have already been provided. There's item 1 and item 2 on the recommendations. Do I have your agreement?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Tim. Item 7 on the agenda, the annual performance report. Saqib, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm Saqib Yassin. I'm the Performance and Insight Manager. Presenting the Corporate Plan Annual Performance Report firstly. It's closely linked to my second item, which is the KPIs. But dealing with the Annual Performance Report first of all, it's something we do every year, but this is a retrospective look back over the last year. It's the first time we've had a chance to look back over the new corporate plan that was put in place last year. And it intends to shout about our performances and give a good, honest appraisal about our performance against the commitments and obligations that were set out in the corporate plan. And ultimately, this will be collated and published into the public domain on our website. The annual performance report, it's set out against the corporate plan priority areas of people, place and prosperity, underpinned by the Future New Forest Transformation Programme. And it sort of seals our first year of the 4 quarterly updates that we normally bring to panels. Our executive management team, EMT, have looked at the report in detail, and all of their comments and suggestions have been accommodated. Again, this report will go to all of the panels, and all panel comments will be collated and presented back to Cabinet on the 2nd of July as part of our reporting commitment. I trust you will agree this report presents a strong account of the wonderful work delivered across our services. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Peter.
Peter, thank you.
Councillor Peter Armstrong, I do notice on the KPIs where it's got future New Forest, 38% of staff turnover is sadly in red at the moment. I can understand some of that with all the things happening in local government, but it is a slight concern. On a very slight, just a very slight matter, before this report gets through to everything else, where there's a picture of the people at Hardley who are in the photo. Alan and me weren't invited as the local district councillors, were we, Alan, to be part of that photo, which is rather sad, but Hardley is not spelt correctly under the photo, and we'd rather Hardley was spelt correctly under the photo. But yeah, I'm just concerned really about the percentage of staff turnover at this point in time.
Thank you. I'll certainly take that comment away and check on the typo there. With regards to the KPIs, we've of course included them in the annual performance report. I would make mention of that in the next item, which is a KPI, and happy to address that question now if you prefer, and just to cover that about the staff turnover question. We do have leaver destinations mapped out against our exit interviews when people do leave, but in all honesty, they are seldom taken up. It's an optional thing. It's something our executive management team have raised, that actually we feel we need to do a bit of a more deep dive and understand where, when people leave this organisation, why is it they leave and where do they go? So there is a data capture exercise being undertaken by our HR department, and we intend to bring that back with some more detail.
Right. Thanks, Sadiq. Any other questions? Sorry, Malcolm. Yes, there is. Yes, you are. I've got your name. Off you go. You're fine. Yeah. Very well. Right. If there's no more questions in this particular agenda item, the recommendation on page 117 that we review the corporate plan, and we've made our comments, so I thank you. So your agreement with the recommendations. Thank you. Sorry, Alan?
Sachs already said that.
We've finished with the item, Alan.
He's going to check the spelling. He's already said he's going to check all the spelling.
Right, we'll...
Apologise, Chairman, for jumping.
Don't jump onto the next one. Item 8, then, is the corporate plan. And again, Sagid, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the key performance information, key performance indicator data for Q4. It being Q4, we have a few annual measures rolled into this as well. And the report also outlines and describes a year-end exercise that we've done called the target setting refresh, and that's allowed us to review that. So it's 2 items presented and packaged in one. On the KPI dashboard, measure IDs 16 through to 33 only are for place and sustainability review today. However, if you have questions on other measures, I'm happy to take them away or take the questions as we go through this. I'll just start by saying we've taken on board comments as we presented the dashboard through to panels, and this we have presented a new and different format of the dashboard. We've always tried to improve the layout to make it present the data in the best way possible and best to illustrate the progress of each measure. So now that we have 4 quarters worth of data in a lot of cases, we've presented this back in a graphical form We've still got what we're calling the metadata, or the information around the metric in the top right that tells you what good looks like and the direction of travel that's preferred. But it's felt with the graph view that we have now, we can get a better indication of the direction of travel and the journey that the measure has gone through in the last year. Each KPI also includes all of the RAG history, so the red, amber, green status flag through the year. So we've got that presented in a single visual alongside all of the narrative history. And that's important because where performance might have been low in one of the quarters, it allows you to then cross-examine the previously submitted narratives and the mitigation offers to make sure that has come into fruition and taken corrective action. So moving on to the performance items themselves, we've got data presented for 32 of the KPIs. 10 of those are marked for consideration at Place and Sustainability. My summary would be that major planning application determined in time is above target. Minor planning application determined in time is just below our local target, but is 22 percentage points above the government target. All of the planning applications have performed at the green rated all year. 6 appeals were heard in the last quarter and all were dismissed. Household using our chargeable garden waste service has performed at green all year. Our annual figure for the emissions from council's vehicle fleet is set at monitor, and there was a reduction of 38 tonnes of CO2 emission compared with last year. The number of fly tipping incidents has remained below target through the year, reflecting education and preventative measures taken. We always like to report the actual number here, just to give an indication. The actual number of incidents was 696, with the lowest figure in the year being during quarter 3. Before I move on to the target refresh summary, which should just outline things that have changed over the next year for 25-26, I'd be happy to take any specific questions on the KPIs.
Sorry? Any specific questions on the KPIs? They don't appear to be any.
Doesn't seem to be, Sagib.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the target.
One second. Malcolm? Any comments about it?
Yeah, each time you bring them, you do make them better. I pay definite tribute to that, and you've got a lot more detail around it. I just want to ask about a couple of these that are here, and I've been checking the back sheet to make sure I haven't missed anything. I mean, we've got resident perception of their quality of fear of alarm. Now, KPIs are designed to improve things, but we've got 2 here, which are quite important ones, really. One about perception of fear of crime and people feeling safe in the local area. And the answer is, well, they're in grey because we haven't had a resident survey. But how are we going to improve those things then, even if we find out they are getting worse? That's the first question. And another interesting one was similar. It was percentage score for the overall tenant satisfaction. We haven't got that because we haven't done a survey, have we? So that's the first question on those. And I give you the other one, the second question at the same time. Why is 6 fly tipping per 1,000 people an acceptable number? Just wonder where that came from, because no fly tipping per 1,000 people is an acceptable number. But the way you've taught it is very good.
Apologies, I'll make a quick note of that. Thank you, Councillor Wade. I really appreciate your comments, actually, because I remember having a conversation with you just as we were putting the corporate plan together, and you know, your vision as well about the visualisations in the dashboards needing to tell a story. So it's something that's really stuck with us, and indeed, Councillor Janet Richards, her appetite to have the dashboards presented in the public domain. So these are things that have really stuck with us when we developed our performance management framework last year. So, yeah, for us, that's really important because it gives us that transparency and accountability. So thank you for your comments. I really do appreciate that. With regards to the resident survey, it is one of the next item bits around the target refresh. And just for noting here that there was a reprioritisation exercise that went through Cabinet, and a decision was made and noted in amongst the minutes from that Cabinet session around work that would be deprioritised this year for lots of different reasons, all recorded in the notes of that meeting, and the resident survey being one of them. So we're not planning to undertake a resident survey at this time. So there are 6 measures that are within the dashboard that we don't intend or don't have a plan to report on currently. But specifically around fear of crime, as you say, it's a perception, and actually we don't want anybody to feel to have a perception of crime, but we have undertaken measures and specifics in our dashboard around CCTV and security so that people feel more assured. And again, perception, for, one person can perceive something a different way to another. But there are specific things in there now to make people feel assured that we are doing everything we can so that people in the district are safe. I can, if you're happy, I can move on to the tenant perception, the fly tipping question.
Oh, go on. Let's come back on that one.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, but the point that, and I get the argument for CCTV, but the majority of fear of crime isn't in the centre of Hythe or Fawley or Fordingbridge. It's, in your own neighbourhood where we don't have cameras. So the point I'm trying to make across is if we're going to have a KPI that we want to try and improve things, there needs to be an end, a result, a way of improving it. And I suggest that possibly, unless we have something from the police, we haven't got a way of really making a difference there. Just that point.
Thank you. I think that's noted. There are things that are, as a KPI, there are indications across our district. We want to paint a picture and understand what's happening across our district, despite us knowing that there are some that we have a great degree of influence over and some we have less influence over. With respect to the tenant perception measure, that will be coming through and doing the rounds through resources and transformation. Beg your pardon. It went through housing and communities yesterday, so we have completed that survey. We normally report that within Q1, and the reason why we do that is because although we have the values, and it's very positive, it's going through the housing and communities panel yesterday, and it will be going to Cabinet on the 2nd of July. We normally report that in Q1 because that's ties in the dates when we submit that to the regulator, and we also publish that into the public domain as well as part of that process. And just your final question there really about fly tipping, we agree, no amount of fly tipping is great, is it? We would like it to be 0. We accept there's a reality there that we know it will never be 0 despite our best efforts, and I know our crews do a lot of work in trying to enforce that doesn't happen. The measures we have got there, they are based on per capita, per population values. I think we've explained this at the last panel. And we do that really just to give an indication and a comparison, knowing that, of course, we're fairly unique and no other place is really like the New Forest. But it does give us a comparison against other areas, other comparator groups. But accepted, we don't really want any of that. We did at that time, when we last had the question, we've agreed to always include the actual number. So rather than just giving a per 1,000 population number, we always put the actual values into the narrative text now. So you'll see that on the dashboard, there's 4 lots of narrative there, each with the numbers in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sakib.
Chair, shall I move on to the target refresh?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So just a note on the target refresh exercise, and just to serve as a reminder, really the reason why we're doing this is because we're thinking about the 25-26 reporting year now, and we wanted to make sure that where we've got performance values now over the last year, that are we suitably challenging ourselves? Are those targets still appropriate? We had a couple of measures marked as monitor, and we wanted to make sure that was still appropriate to have them in that way. And actually we had some measures where we didn't have a target set in place for this financial year because we needed a year's worth of baselining data to understand our trajectory and then set appropriate targets. So I think the things to be aware of, first of all, I've mentioned the resident survey and the 6 measures across the entirety of the dashboard that won't be reported on. so I won't overlabour that point. A change to KPI 19. This is the percentage of allowed appeals measure that has had a change of calculations, and we've had a lot of debate about this over the last year, hence the desire to revisit this. And some of that debate was sparked by our number of appeals against the decisions that are made are quite low, and it results in huge fluctuations in what looks like huge fluctuations in the performance every quarter. So we've looked at two aspects of this, and we found when we provide the narrative around this measure, the thing that's really useful is to see how many appeals were allowed in the last quarter, and actually in the context of how many decisions have been made. So we have updated that measure, and we feel this will give us a better picture, and it will be a measure with a value that is less susceptible to huge swings in performance. Our chargeable waste, it's performed really well over the last year, and with our executive management team reviewing that, they've asked that the targets that were in place for this year be increased further, demonstrating growth to this income-generating service. We have made a slight tweak to our fly tipping incidents in that we've done a profile target now, quarter on quarter. So we're converting this into a cumulative value. So what we should see is a target profile over the next 4 quarters. And as we start getting values over the next year, you'll see the actuals being reported alongside. So it's just a slightly different way of reporting that. Aside those points of note, all others updated targets have been set where necessary, and they've been aligned with the direction of travel established last year. I'll just ask if there's any further questions on the target refresh. Thank you.
Right, yes, thank you, Sakib. Any questions? Fees to targets? No. You've got a happy panel here, Sakib. Congratulations, because the colour green rag is the most dominant one in the lists, which is a good thing to see. But also, not only that, you actually have targets above the government standard, and you exceed your own targets at the same time. So it's a good report coming out there, so thank you very much indeed. Right, well, as far as the panel is concerned, I need you to turn to page 137 on your agenda, where there's recommendation. Effectively, we have considered it, both that and the refreshed targets. So can I have your agreement? You've done the recommendations? Agreed. Yes? Thank you very much. Right. Thank you for waiting, gentlemen. It's item 9, the portfolio holders update. And I may do it in an arguably alphabetical order. Councillor Jeff Blunden, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd first of all like to pick up on the comments made on fly tipping by Councillor Wade, and I quite accept no incidence of fly tipping is acceptable, and we will continue all we can to prevent that and take the appropriate action where we can to prosecute the perpetrators. On another note, after many months of planning, our new and improved waste and recycling service was launched on Monday, the 9th of June. The Phase 1 area includes areas of New Milton, Barton-on-Sea, Milford-on-Sea, Lymington, Brockenhurst and East Boulder, as well as a small number of rural properties right the way across our district. These changes have seen the first ever collections of waste and recycling wheeled bins in the district, and the first ever separate collections of food waste. We're already seeing the benefits of this new way of working coming to fruition. Not from driving around the district, you can see an immediate benefit on the collection day, where we've seen a huge reduction in the amount of torn sacks and rubbish strewn across many streets. Our staff are now working with a modern, safer collection system so that they can deliver this really important service without the fear of injuring themselves from the old way of collection. Our residents can also now have recycling food waste every week. The last 7 days of the service, we collected 42 tonnes of food waste, which is now being processed to generate cleaner electricity and fertiliser. The rollout has really been a monumental logistic exercise. There are over 31,000 households in phase 1 area, meaning that we've had to deliver 124,000 wheel bins and collection caddies. Any outstanding bin deliveries being reported to us by the public are being resolved quickly. As with any service change, there will be a period of bedding in the new service. This kind of transition cannot be implemented overnight, and minor disruption is anticipated in any project of this scale. But our crews have been working really hard, new vehicles, new collection rounds, and a new way of collecting waste and recycling. Despite all this change, last week we only had 1% of collections being reported to us as missed by the public. I do understand that the change can be frustrating, particularly when it affects our daily routines. But we cannot ignore the long-term benefits of the service that improves recycling, reduces waste, and modernises outdated practices. I really want to thank the residents for their patience during this transition and working with us to reduce waste, improve recycling, and comply with government guidelines. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions? Oh, right, list, hang on. Adam first, and then Steph.
Thank you, Councillor Blunden, for your report. There seem to be some teething problems with the collections in Brockenhurst, mostly focused around 2 points. One being food waste collections, where I've seen pictures and I've had reported to me instances where the donkeys have got at it or dogs have got at it, and it's not entirely clear actually what's happened to me. You know, are people not locking it properly or what? I'm not exactly sure what that is. But the other one is possibly more substantial in that people who live up private roads, it's causing a lot of concern for people who have to and are unable to move their bins some substantial distance rather than the usual edge or curtilage of their properties, which has been the established policy for decades. I just wonder, is this something that can have some urgent attention? And if it is now the new policy that people can't leave bins where they were previously, can it be walked back for some people? Because some residents don't feel they've been told about this and seem to be legitimately concerned and cross about what they feel is quite a major diminution in service. I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I am aware of the concern raised about donkeys potentially interfering with food waste caddies. At this stage, I've really got no data, so I'm awaiting reports from our crews to suggest, is this a widespread problem or just a particularly one-off problem? But that is being followed up.
Honestly, from what I've seen in Brockenhurst, two or three incidents, but I've seen pictures.
Yep. On the actual position we collect our bins from, that has been well communicated to residents. I understand there is maybe still some confusion on that, but if a resident has a particular concern, they should contact one of our waste advisors, and particularly if we have residents also that are unable to present their bin, of course that can be considered as part of our assisted waste collection service, but there is clear parameters for that.
Thank you, Jeff. Stephanie, on next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to say that obviously I've had surgeries in the last couple of weeks, We've had a lot of people really worrying. We haven't actually got the bins except for the garden waste yet. That is actually quite tricky up my road. It's quite narrow, and once the garden waste bin is out, I can't imagine what's going to be like with a few more, but it'll be a bit like Dodgems. So we've got narrower roads than mine. Mine is a two-way footpathless road. So when I wrote to customer services, because I usually just write to one of the offices, I got told that these types of inquiries must go to customer services. I wasn't sure if it was actually an automated reply, but I put, where are my, residents that are, worrying with footpathless areas, where they're going to put the bins. The reply was, you put it on the curb. So I've now got to write back and say, I just explained we don't have a curb. So in our road in particular, the bin is actually going to be in the road if it's off your property. And I think the question was, can they put the bin in their property? But the reply was, you put it on the curb.
Yeah, I have that reply as well.
As I understand it, and James might well correct me if I'm wrong, but you present your bins at the boundary of your property.
Okay. And then most people down my road work. They are going to be out there all day, so if they get damaged or whatever, because again, we can't get the speed limit down the road, we can't get any changes made, people are going to just push them along with the car, I think.
Yeah, well, I don't think the implementation of wheelie bins, we can actually change speed limits, but certainly...
You should see them going 20 miles an hour down the road.
Certainly on, as I say, on the presentation of your bin, that should be on the boundary of your property. Is that correct, James? Yep.
Yes, it is, and certainly, obviously, by the time we get to phase 3 in your area, we'll also have the benefit of all the kind of learning from phases 1 and 2, Stephanie. But it will be very clearly communicated to the residents at that point.
Can I just say that the bags were actually stored outside mine this week, and I got all the cat litter and all the split bags for the first time in years, because I did ring the council and say don't put them in my driveway.
And that's exactly why we're moving from plastic bags to wheelie bins.
It could be used as a flying stick. You finished, Jeff?
Michael had a question.
Oh, sorry, Michael, you've got a question? You have indeed. It's over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I actually wrote about that road, and the response was, when we get to phase 3, we'll come back to you on that. But the question I want to ask you is, on behalf of the 5 members on this panel that represent phase 3, on behalf of all our residents, what are the principal lessons you've learned from the rollout of phase 1 so far that will benefit our residents when you get round to phase 3?
I think with any service that you provide, it's not just it's ongoing lessons that you learn all the time. It's not just when something is implemented. It's an ongoing process, and you learn from that process and you make adjustments.
Come back. Can I give you a bit of advice? In my area, apparently, in phase 3, because it's a country lane, all the residents were delivered wheelie bins, but nobody told them they were coming. So can I humbly suggest that we need to improve our communication to avoid issues like that?
Certainly, that will be noted, but I have the assurances on the communication side that with regard to the narrow roads across the district, that communication was sent out, but again, we can follow that up.
Well, not all of the people I talked to when I was there because of bins. So I didn't know about that.
Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if you had sight of the press release about the new wheelie bin collection, which was issued by the Liberal Democrats on the 13th of June, and Councillor Wade will have had a copy of that particular press release because it was sent to him. It's an outrageous press release because it seeks to make political capital out of this situation. it talks about bin chaos descending into confusion, miscollection and vermin problems. Councillor Davis says, this isn't teething trouble, it's widespread confusion, misdeliveries, uncollected waste, and streets littered with torn bin bags. What saddens me about this, and I think we all need to take note of it, is this is a criticism of our officers. Because you need to bear in mind that we as councillors make the policy, but it is officers who implement that policy. And so, to do as you have done, issued such a scathing press release about this rollout, doesn't reflect badly on the Conservatives. What it does is to highlight what you think and your party thinks about the performance of our officers. It's an outrageous press release, and I would hope you would want to now disassociate yourself, and I could read far more of what is in this press release, which has gone out into the public domain, and members of the public can read it. So you wanted to blame the Conservatives without realising, and I'm suffering from tautology, not one of my illnesses, but I'm suffering from tautology. In essence, we as councillors determine and decide policy. It is officers who implement it. And on this occasion, you are criticising the people who implemented your and my policy.
I think I'm allowed a response to that. Firstly, you don't have to work hard to criticise the Conservatives. You do such a job of your own. Although I didn't actually write that particular piece, and it isn't me quoted in it, but standing up for my members, that's what they feel. That's what they think. That's what they're told by other residents. So if that's unpalatable, then you ought to say, perhaps we need to learn from that and do better next time. That's what you should be doing, not criticising somebody for raising a point they're concerned about, because those particular councillors were representing the people that they represent, and that's it.
If I may, it's perfectly good to criticise, but not to blame the people who were not responsible for the implementation of it.
Right, thank you, gentlemen. I think we've thank you, Michael. Malcolm, thank you. You made your points. We've got a late evening, so let's be getting on. There are two more people who have asked questions. Adam, you're next.
Yeah, just really quickly to add that I'm certainly not engaging in any party political potshots or critiquing officers at all. But on the point again about people with lengthy private roads, Brockenhurst does seem to be disproportionately affected, and the people who have come to me with their concerns about this have actually sent me the correspondence that they received, and they said, well, you take a look at that. Does that make clear that my bins aren't going to be received where they used to be? And to be honest, to my eyes, it didn't either. So I think some people do have a legitimate case there, and I'll do what you said. I'll pass on their concerns to the council, but I really hope it can be resolved, because people are quite cross about this in Brockenhurst. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Adam. One person who can answer that to a certain extent. Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I really want to close it down on this press thing, but I think there was a response to the press statements, okay, from myself on two occasions, which gave all the answers. I did find it rather disturbing, actually, that the claims were inaccurate and they're really unhelpful.
Right, thank you. I think enough has been aired. Thank you, gentlemen. Can we now move on, please? Derek Tim, please.
It is unfortunate that my name begins with T, because it means I'm always going to be last in this. But never mind.
You could change your name.
I realise it's a hot evening and everybody's waiting for the end of the meeting. But
we're waiting to hear what you've got to say.
absolutely. Right, well, I'll be brief then. I'll start with something positive. Congratulations go to 2 staff members of our building control team. Chris Daly, one of our 2 apprentices, has won the National Award of Student of the Year or Apprentice of the Year. Excellent. Which is excellent news, isn't it? But sadly, unfortunately, our apprentices will be leaving us at the end of the year, so that's the bad news. Another member of staff in our street naming and numbering team also won an award for accuracy in placing data on GIS mapping. Don't ask me how they do it, I have no idea. But it is vitally important for our sat-navs, I hasten to add. Now, the reforms to planning committees, that consultation has been covered elsewhere, but I will just urge you to respond to the consultation individually and also inform your parish councils of it. The link is on the website, the government website, and we will also, as James has said, be making a response on behalf of the council as well on that. And now on the local plan, we've done a lot of consultation, a lot of data gathering, and there are still many changes to come. There are some key dates subject to cabinet approval. The first one is in November this year, when we will publish a further consultation on the local plan, setting out a proposed direction of travel, and this will include general areas where development is being considered, so it'll give us a little bit more of an idea. And then in the autumn of 2026, I say autumn because of course these things can move around a little bit, the draft plan, including at this stage specific development sites, will be published for consultation, and this is called a Regulation 19 for the experts. And finally, by the end of 2026, we will have had all the consultations and all the results of that and examinations and so on. So we will then decide to go to examination or not by the planning inspectorate, and that will go ahead. So those are the key dates on that. Now on grant applications, now this is an interesting one. The Rural England Prosperity Fund has now given rise to 2 funds that are currently open for bids. The Community Grant Scheme is a £50,000 sum for bids between 2 and 10,000, and the Supporting Local Business Grant Scheme is for the same bid range with a £70,000 sum, and bids are being accepted until June the 30th. So if you know of any people that might apply for that, charities, etc., and parish councils and so on, you've got till June the 30th, midnight. There is also the SIL scheme, which has £1 million of funds available, and the maximum bid for one project is £100,000. Bids are open until the 8th of August, a little bit longer for this one, 8th of August. Details of these schemes with the application forms are on our website. You can just put grants into the search box and follow the links, and it's all there on the website, the District Council's website. Finally, Totton regeneration, and in this aspect, the master plan work is underway, led by our consultants, AR Urbanism, who are being supported by Ferrier Urbanism, who are carrying out the engagement work with stakeholders. And they have recruited around 40 or 50 local residents selected from volunteers who will be listening to presentations and giving their views to help us further the master plan. The Totton Partnership will be updated on progress at our next meeting, taking place on the 17th of July. And that's it.
Lovely. Thank you, Derek. And congratulations, obviously, to your 2 successful officers. Do give them as the panel how pleased we are they've been so successful, and sorry that one of them's going. We ought to learn how to sort of hang on to our staff. Never mind. Anyway, congratulations to them. Thank you, then, both gentlemen. Item 10 is the work programme. It's on your papers at the back of your bundle, and noting the next meeting will be the 11th of September, and the plan is, the agenda is almost in place by the look of it. Okay, that's it, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I now close this meeting Thank you.